Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. If you're here because you always wanted to make your own game, or you just accidentally clicked on this video, I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to be starting an exciting journey, how to make a simple 3D platformer game. You know those games where you run and jump, we're making one of those. But don't worry, you don't need to be a coding genius or a game dev prodigy to follow along. This is a beginner friendly, and I'll walk you through every step. By the end of this series, you will have a basic 3D platformer where your character can move, jump, and maybe even collect a few shiny objects. And if things don't work out perfectly the first time, no worries. That's just part of the process. In the first video, we will set up our project, create a simple player character, and get them moving around. Think of this as a foundation for your game, and don't worry. We will build on this in future videos, adding more features as we go. Okay, let's get started. First, click on this one, the Universal 3D Core, because we're doing a 3D game. And name it 3D Platformer. Uncheck Unity Cloud, and then create project, and wait for it to open up. Okay, now that your project has opened up, you'll want to click Remove README Files from the inspector. Now that you removed README files, it's not necessary, but it helps clean it up. You want to click on this right arrow next to the sample scene to lower the objects in your hierarchy. The hierarchy holes are your game objects. If you click on, let's say, main camera, the inspector shows all the components. Components are add-ons to the game object. This is a project folder where you can import your assets, create files, folders to make everything organized. The console is for when you get any errors or you want to debug something to the log. Scene view is where you can edit things around and move around, add objects, move objects. The game view is where you can see what your game looks like. How you move around the scene view is honestly not that hard. You press the middle mouse button and hold it to pan around. You right click and hold to rotate. If you want to move around the scene, you hold right click and hit W, A, S, D. If you want to zoom in, you scroll up on the scroll wheel, and to scroll out, same thing. If you want to go faster, right click and hold shift and move to what direction you want to go faster. If you want to increase how fast you move, hold right click and scroll up. Next step is to add a cube in order for us to move our character. So you can either click on the plus icon, 3D objects, and go to cube. Or you can right click on a hierarchy, 3D object, and then cube. Okay, now you're going to want to right click on a cube, select rename, and name it player. And then you want to go to inspector, right click on the transform, and hit reset to put it back at 0, 0, 0. Okay, let's say you want to move the object. You hit W on your keyboard, and then you drag the arrow to move it. Left or right, you want to grab the red arrow. To move it forward and backwards, you want to grab the blue arrow. If you want to move up and down, you want to hold the green arrow. If you want to rotate it, you hit E on your keyboard. The blue rotates it on the x-axis. Y rotates it on that axis. And then green rotates on this axis. If you make a mistake or don't like it, you can always hit Control Z. If you hit R on your keyboard, you can scale it up on the X, Y, and Z axis. Okay, so now we're going to learn a bit about the physics in this game. If you hit W on your keyboard, and move your cube up on a y-axis. And then, if you go to Inspector, while you're clicked on a player cube, and click Add Component, and go to Physics, and then you add a rigid body. This will make it so your object has gravity on it. And if you click on the play button, you'll see it in action. As you can see your cube fall off the screen. Okay, now we're going to get into movement. So in order to get into movement, you can add a script and name it player movement. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to right click on the project files where it says assets, create a new model behavior script, and name it player movement. Don't forget to assign it to the game object you want it to go on, which is going to be the player. Oh, you had to wait for it to compile first. Now that it's compiled, double-click the player movement script to open it in your integrated development environment of choice. Now you'll see two methods, a start and an update. The start function is ran once before the first execution, so as soon as you press play, it runs. Update runs every frame. Okay, so in order to make movement, you want to do public void fixed update. Unity likes it when you do fixed update because it's working with physics materials, which is what we're going to be working with in this one. Now we need to create some variables. So do public float move speed equals 50f. Because it's a float, which usually has a decimal point, if you do f at it, you have to have f in the end. You can also do int and remove the f. Either way works. The next variable we're going to need is a public rigid body, and we're going to call it RB. A rigid body is a component we added that gave it physics. Inside the fixed update function, we're going to write an if statement, which runs until the condition inside of it is true or false. So we're going to do if input dot get key, which checks if the user has pressed a keybind, and you want the keybind to be A. Then you want to do rigid body dot add force. Then, because we're using on X, Y, and Z axis, we're going to do vector 3 dot left. Then we're going to times it by the move speed. And then we're going to add a comma, the force mode dot force, which makes it so it uses its own force to stop and move. And then semicolon. Then we basically do the same thing again. If input dot get key code dot D, then RB dot add force, vector 3 dot right this time times move speed, then force mode dot force. Then save by pressing Ctrl S and go back to Unity and wait for it to compile. Okay, now that it's done and compiled, you want to go to your player in the hierarchy. Make sure that it is visible right here. If it is not visible, you're going to want to drag your movement script into it. Since I already have it, it adds extra one. So you can right click on it and delete extra one. So the rigid body, RB, you want to drag your rigid body from here by left clicking on it and holding and dragging it into this slot. Now make sure you turn the drag up to something like 5 so you can slow down. And for now, I would freeze the position on a y-axis by clicking on the constraints and clicking freeze position on y-axis. Now press play to see what happens. As you can see, you now have player movement. Now you can move it down to normal by dragging it up and put it at like 0. And now if the speed is too fast or too slow for you, you can change it by moving the move speed number. If you want to be slower, do 25. If you want to be faster, do 100. Or any number that you want. Alrighty, well that is all we're going to do for today. If you liked it, make sure you leave a like, subscribe for part 2.